Good morning, everybody. I wanted to continue with lesson 13 for a little bit. Today will be a short demonstration, but I wanted to talk more about the appearance panel, and I also want to talk more about graphic styles and how they can really help you create, I think, more complex, more sophisticated illustrations in a very effective, elegant way. So let's where we were yesterday, I think a couple of things that I wanted to repeat and to expand upon, or that when you add multiple, or if you want to add multiple styles to live text, that's one of the things. It's a little bit different than objects that you apply styles to. Then also I wanted to go over some of the effects. Remember, we talked yesterday about that we have Illustrator effects and Photoshop effects. In Illustrator, most of the Photoshop effects really don't do anything. It's worth testing some of them out because they're all, all of these effects are editable and can be changed whenever you want. None of them are destructive. They're always non-destructive effects that can be changed and edited at your, whenever you want, your discretion. So I created another little file over here. It's nothing special, but we have some text here. And if we just select the text and we look at it in using the selection tool, we can see that we have some type and we have no stroke and we have a black fill. If I come over to the type tool and I highlight the text, you'll notice that it changes a little bit and it highlights as type. And this is what I was showing you the other day. It's really something that I wasn't aware of until recently, that there is a difference between live text and other objects when you want to apply multiple effects. So what you need to do is that, normally with an object, I can select it and I can just, as I was doing the other day, I can just select the fill. And if I want to duplicate it or create multiple fills, click on it and drag it into a new into the new graphic style down here, or rather the new duplicate item here. But that doesn't work with text. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select it with the selection tool. And instead of clicking and dragging here, what I'm going to do is to duplicate this, I'm going to go ahead and or to create a multiple fill, I'm going to go ahead and click from down here. So we have add a new stroke, add a new fill. If we want to add an effect, we can add from here. If we want to clear an appearance, we can do that from here. If we want to duplicate a selected item, we can do that from here, and we can delete them from here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and with the fill selected, I'm going to go ahead and select duplicate. And you can see that I have two now, one on top of another, layered on top of one another. So let's select the bottom one and select pink for the fill. And you'll notice that nothing shows up. And also notice that the fill, in fact, is still black because it's layered on top of the pink. But if I select the black and I come in here and click on the little down arrow to reveal my swatch panel, I can select, for example, a fill that has transparency like so that we can see through it. Okay, so you can create some really complex patterns with this and effects. So this is a pattern fill that has transparency. So not only do I have the pattern, but I can see through it, the pink background. So that's one of the things that we can do with that. I could also add a gradient to this, which you normally can't do. So let's come back here and let's switch. I'm going to take the fill and I'm going to, let's go ahead and just remove the fill. That one. Let's select the pink. And I'm going to come up here and let's go ahead and select a gradient and see what we get here. Notice that we get the gradient. If I switch to the gradient tool, okay, it should allow me with the fill, allow me to edit it. Now, if I can't, then we have another issue, and I probably do need to take it and yeah, see, it won't let me do it. So it's applying the gradient, but not in a fashion that I want. So let's come back over here with type, and you'll see that we have a gradient fill here. So let's edit the gradient from the properties panel and see if it allows us to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it down here, and it will. So I can't use the gradient tool, but I can use it over here. If I select edit gradient with, that's included in type, then I can do it from here. So if I want to switch to a 90-degree, like so, I can do that. That's really kind of nice. Okay, so there's a lot that we can do. And what makes this so powerful in here is that I can switch and I can go back to type and I can edit the type, so that the type remains editable. Now, not only does it remain editable, but when it's in type mode, look at what we have over here in the appearance panel. It's a fill, black fill, and it's no stroke. Right? So what we've done when we selected the selection tool, it overrides the default settings for the text appearance. So to see all of these changes that we've made, so for example, if I want to add a stroke from here, I could do that. Click in here. Let's go ahead and I want to make it, we'll make it a pink stroke again. Okay. And again, if I go back to the text tool and we have editable text and I highlight it, notice it goes back to no stroke black fill. Big difference between that and a regular object like we have down here. So let me focus on this for a minute. And a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add multiple appearances, but we can do it a little bit differently here. I remember I said that all I have to do is click on a particular layer and I can duplicate it by dragging it on top of the new appearance from here. So let's go again. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click down here and I'm going to select again, maybe a pink fill. And you can't see anything because again, the fill on top of it that where I duplicated it is overpowering it. If there was some transparency to this, I mean, I could come back in here and I can, for this layer up here, if I wanted to change the opacity of it to allow it to be able to see through, notice the color of the effect that I get here. It's kind of a dirty pink or more of a mauve color. If I go ahead and I make the opacity 100%, it's going to go back to black. So for each of these appearance layers, you can change the opacity as well, which is another thing that we can do that we didn't talk about before. So what I'm going to do to this one, though, I'm going to go back again and I'm going to click and I'm going to add that texture, okay, that pattern fill with a pink that's revealed behind it. And we can do one more thing. I can go ahead and if with this layer selected, I'll go ahead and I'll duplicate it from down here, create a new one. And what I'm going to do instead, though, is I'm going to select this one here. So within a couple of minutes, we've created a very complex shape, appearance of the shape that can all be edited very easily and modified and changed, whenever we like. You can edit these things forever. There are so many, possibilities, it kind of makes your head spin sometimes. It's difficult to arrive at a final decision sometimes. Okay, so that's one of the things that we can do. The other thing that I wanted to point out too is I wanted to point out graphic styles. So let me remove some of these and then look at the graphic styles library, because there's some really nice, with most of these panels. When we get to the symbols tomorrow, and the brush panel, and any number of these, the panels, if we go to our swatches and we look at the libraries here, you're going to see that we have different color libraries. If you recall from previous lessons, we had some color books. So that's where we got our Pantone colors. There's also textures, there's patterns that are available from here. It's really worth your while checking them out and seeing what's available. So the graphic styles is something that I wanted to touch on today as well, just to show you some of them. So if I select, let's go ahead and close the swatch panel, and I have the top fill here. So these are going to probably be covered up. But what if I were to select this fill right here? Now that changed everything. Okay. So by applying that graphic style, it replaced everything that I had done. And I find it useful to come in here and to deconstruct what they have done. It's similar to what I had done just a moment ago. You'll notice that we have a pattern fill on top of a solid fill. Okay. No stroke. If I want to add a stroke, I can add a stroke and we can change it. And then once we do that, if you want to create another graphic style from that, you just simply click the little new graphic style, and then you'll have one there as well. You'll have a brand new one. It's kind of interesting. You have to remember to select the object. Let's see what the button looks like. So back in the day in early web design, this is how we would design buttons. Buttons are still used for interface with app designs and that sort of thing. So here's some others you can look at that are fairly complex, that take a while to design, but you can go back in, note how they are constructed, and then you can go back in and then you can edit them. Now look at how many fills they have for this one. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fills and no stroke. Now, one of my favorites, though, is I'm going to come back to the type here. I'm going to enlarge it. Let me get rid of my shape for a second here. It's easy enough to create a new one. I'm going to select the type, and I'm going to enlarge it. And I'm going to come back with the selection tool, and I'm going to clear the appearance. Okay. So we've cleared all the appearances, and we're going to go back. Well, what I want to do is I want to add a new stroke and a new fill. But let's try the fill. And I don't want any fill at all. I want it to be empty. Okay. And then what I want to do is I'm going to create a new stroke here. So let's try this, and I'll just leave this. I'm going to change the color of it just so I can see what I'm doing. Make it pink, and I'm going to boost it, the size of it a little bit. But what if I wanted this to look like neon? Now, it may not work with editable text because, as you can see, I have no fill, but it remains to be filled. So if I come back with the text, I don't know that it will allow me. It has opacity 100%. So let's come back here with a fill. And let me take opacity off. Nope, see, that's for the whole object. So that doesn't work. So what I may have to do, let's test it out though. I'm going to go under my graphic styles here. And I'm going to select libraries, and I should find it down here. Well, we have type effects that are pretty cool. Image effects, neon effects is what I wanted to explore. You can see that there's a bunch of them. So I'm going to make sure that I select the stroke, make sure that the stroke is selected. And let's go ahead and let's select the blue. And there you go. By just applying that appearance, notice that it did remove the fill. I was lucky. And if we look carefully at the stroke itself, it has a neon appearance to it. I really like these a lot. These can be used in illustration all the time. Okay, that's really pretty cool. Now, again, if you want to see how this is done, again, you note that there is no fill for this, but look at all the strokes that have been applied, and they all have different widths and different, very similar analogous colors that create that curved gradient appearance. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strokes in order to create this effect. With the object selected, if I want to try a different one, just select a different one, and it applies that appearance and replaces the old one. They're really, really very cool. So I encourage you, not just for the neon effects, for graphic styles, I encourage you to explore all of the libraries in here, because you will, especially when we get to tomorrow under the symbol library, because there are lots of fun little illustrations that we can use again and again and again that are really very nice. Okay. So the other things that I wanted to touch on is that under effects, remember we were talking about that we have both let me make a shape again. We have the Illustrator effects, and let me clear that out here. Let's go ahead and clear that. We have the Illustrator effects and we have the Photoshop effects. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the effect. And I'm just going to use the default fill of black, or maybe just red fill here. Okay. So with this selected, with this object selected, let's go through some of the effects that maybe we haven't touched on. And I'm going to show you a couple of my favorites. So let's start with Illustrator effects. If we look under stylize, one of my favorites is scribble. It creates sort of a hand-drawn appearance. We can adjust the angle. So if I wanted this to be a vertical stroke, I can do that. We can also adjust the amount of overlap from here. So does it extend beyond the borders of our shape or not? Does it come inside, or is it centered? We can adjust the variation of the width a little bit and the length. We can also adjust the stroke width a little bit. So we change that a little. See, fat, go to something that's very, very thin. So I like, if I'm using kind of, the look that looks like it was hand drawn and a marker on here. Now you can apply this to the fill. You can apply this to the entire path, or you can apply this to just the stroke surrounding the fill. So this is one of my favorites. This is really nice. And again, we can adjust the spacing. You can play with these for a very long time. And again, it's kind of difficult to decide unless you have something specific in mind. So that's one of my favorites. And again, all of these, once you do this, you say, you know what, I want to use this multiple times, then all you have to do under graphic styles, notice that it's been saving the ones that I've been using, is all I have to do is click the new graphic style, and it's added that to it. So I can come back and use that anytime in the future. So that's one of the really nice ones that I like. So again, if we go back up to effects, make sure that the shape is selected. Okay. What we can do, let's see, that was one of my favorites. Also under distort and transform, you can use pucker and bloat, or really kind of cool, or the roughen, which is really nice. So let me take and move this to the side. Let's go ahead, but I do caution you when you use some of these effects is that they really are taxing on your processor. They take a lot of processor power. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to deselect that one, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the appearance so that we go back, and I'm going to create another one here. So let's create, this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a circle or ellipse. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply just a stroke to this so you can see what we have here. And again, we'll make it a nice bright red stroke. And I'm going to increase the width a little bit so we can really see what's going on here. Zoom in a little bit. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There we go. See, my computer's getting sluggish from using these. So you do need to be careful, but also remember that I am broadcasting to all of you. So that's taking up a fair amount of my bandwidth. So let's go back up under effect and let's go to distort and transform. And let's try roughen. So pucker and bloat and roughen are both kind of cool. So if you want to get kind of an arbitrary freeform look, we have roughen is a nice choice. Now you can select relative versus absolute in terms of the size. Okay. In terms of detail, you want a lot of detail or very little detail? Do you want smooth or do you want corners? So this can add kind of a sense of, what can I say here? Of making it a little bit more spontaneous looking rather than the mechanical look that Illustrator tends to have. So that would be a nice effect. That would be really kind of cool. But if we come back here, I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. And let's go back and I'm going to switch to the red fill. Now let's compare that. Those were some of my, I said we're going to do pucker and bloat too. Huh? So with this one selected, let's go back here. Let's go to pucker and bloat. And let's adjust this a little bit. So if we bloat this, let's see what we get. Not a thing. Let's go to pucker and see what we get. Not a thing. So I'm going, oh, because I have the fill. Let me go ahead and cancel this. Okay, let's try again. If not, I might have to use a different shape. So let's go back again, effect, distort and transform, pucker and bloat. Let's try again. There we go. Now it's working. It's just a little bit sluggish. So when it's bloated, notice what the shapes that you get. If we pucker, then notice what you get here. Now, some of these are difficult to predict what you're going to get, but because it takes so little time and effort, it's fun to experiment with them. And you click OK, and you're good to go. You have, started with a circle. It remains a circle because we've added an effect to it that we can always turn off. We're back to the circle. So it really costs you nothing in terms of your time spent other than time that might be worthwhile for you to explore and experiment, which is what the final assignment is all about. Okay, so let me go ahead and clear this effect. And I'm going to go back again to the fill. And I want again, a red fill. Now let's try and contrast to the Illustrator effects. We're going to try some of the Photoshop effects. So if I go to artistic, for example, and I select there are tons of them. Let's try dry brush and see what happens here. Doesn't look like much of anything. You'll notice that when it pops up this ancillary program, so to speak, this intermediate window that allows us to test all of these. So these are all of the options under the artist contained inside the artistic folder. So you can just click on one after another to see what they look like. And this is the downside to trying to use Photoshop filters with Illustrator, is that more often than not, they don't do much of anything. Okay. But if we test it, now this one with the sponge look, it has kind of it's a long way to go for just that effect. But if we use the little twirly here, and let's try brush strokes. This is what we used the other day. Let's try spatter. Now, again, not much. You see a little bit here. Ink outlines. Yeah, just not a whole lot. So where can these really be used? We did have a good example in this particular lesson to create the appearance of the brush stroke out here. That was one of the few instances that I've seen where a Photoshop effect works really well. Okay, but where they really shine is if you want. I'm going to go ahead and look at. I brought in a photograph. So even though it is a Photoshop effect, and we're not in Photoshop, if we import an image, and I need to point something out with regard to importing images, that if you, for any of you, decide to send me a file that has images, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, and I'm going to import it again or place it again to show you what you need to do. To make sure that, by default, these images are linked to the Illustrator file. That means that they need to be included with the Illustrator file when you send them to me or anyone else. Another option to make sure that you don't forget to send these additional files is that you can embed them. So what I can do is I can select, and I'm going to delete, and then I'm going to go ahead and use place again to bring that image back in here, and you'll see where this is located. So this is something that hasn't been talked about just yet. So if I go to my desktop, find that file again. Let's go to, I am already on the desktop. So let's go, I'm going to switch to list. And here we go. I'll select this one. So you'll notice that right now I have link turned off. So it will embed that. I mean, you have to, it's hard, it will probably be hard for you guys to see, but if we look here, show import options, you want to bring this in as a template. So if you did a sketch, it will automatically import the file as a template. This is what happens if you have this selected by default. If I select a link, then that means that it will be easier for me to work in Illustrator because it will be less taxing on my computer and on my processor. But I have to remember to include that file when I send it to someone to make sure that it shows up. Otherwise, you're going to get an error warning or warning that it's missing, and where can that be found. So I'm going to deselect that to make sure that it's embedded. Now I'll go ahead and I'll click place. It's going to ask me where I want it placed, and it's going to be a huge file. So I need to zoom out and shrink it down. And then we're going to apply some Photoshop filters to this, or photo effects. And you'll see the difference that when you're working with bitmap images, which is what the Photoshop image, or the image is that I brought in from something that I created with my camera. Oh, come on. See, now it's really getting sluggish. So let's zoom in a little bit. Hopefully you can all see this. I'll zoom in one more time. There we go. So again, you have to select it. Let's go to effects, but now I'm going to switch to Photoshop, and I'm going to try artistic effects again. So let's try, just for the heck of it, colored pencil. Let's see what it does. And again, it brings up that ancillary program and gives us an idea of what this is going to look like. So it's zoomed way in. If that's the look you're going for, great. If we try the sponge one again. So notice that all of these have much better, we're having much better luck with them. If I select cutout, looks like it's a posterization. If I select dry brush. And again, with each of these, you have settings over to the right that we can work with. We can work with the brush size. We can work with brush detail. We can add texture to this. Okay. Right now, this is set to dry brush. So let's go ahead and add some texture. I'm going to reduce the amount of detail. Let's increase the brush size just a little bit, so it looks a little bit more painterly. And you can see it takes a moment for the computer to catch up with all of this. We can apply film grain, and some of them look considerably different. Some of them don't look very different at all. Sprayed brush strokes. They're worth, playing with and seeing what kinds of effects you get. Okay. We can work with sketch, see what we get here. Let's look at charcoal and see what the charcoal looks like. Some of them look great, some of them look horrible, but again, you're just clicking on them to see what effect you get. Now this one, the graphic pen, looks pretty nice. So you might, arrive upon a solution just by accident. It looks really pretty interesting. So again, this is going back to the final assignment. This is something that I was talking about with regard to experimentation. Okay. Something else that you can work with too, if you like, is that we haven't talked about it a whole lot, but I don't want this to be the dominant source of your file for your final project. But remember, we can always take an image, and when you bring in a bitmap image, you have the choice of here to image trace. So I'm going to go to Window. And I can bring it up over here as well, but I guess I'm kind of old school. I like looking up over here. And I want to bring up image trace window, and make sure that I see all of my options here. And so I'm going to select preview. Okay. Yeah, see, it's a large image. So, well, let's try it just for the heck of it. And then that will be it for today. really, so it's best if you work with smaller files, not with large ones. So this is the default preset. But we can come in here, and what I would probably choose to do is maybe select 16 colors, so that we break it down into fewer number of shapes. Then I can come back and I can expand it, and I can take elements from this photograph and incorporate them into my Illustrator file where I've used vector images instead. See, it's taken a while to do all of this because it is a big. I would use images that are only 72 pixels per inch, not 300, and make sure that they are very small. So again, we're getting one of those posterized looks. It's color mode. We have 16 colors. You can see what it looks like. If I switch to maybe 6 colors. And if you can work with fewer colors, then that's what I would do. And then once you've done that, then in order to work with something that's a little bit more reasonable in terms of file size, I would expand it so it takes that and it turns it into a vector image. So when this is done with the 6 colors, that's what I'm going to do. So it breaks it down, maybe not exactly the color scheme that I wanted, but what I can do is expand it. Boom. And with all of these selected, if I want to, let's go ahead and I'll close the image trace. I'm going to close graphic styles. Let's close effects. Let's bring up our palette here. Okay, like so. And what I can do, remember up here, it allows me to take these, all of the selected colors, and I can create a brand new color group. So if I select that, I'm going to call it, sunset photo. And I want it from, the selected artwork. Okay. I'll click, and there you go. There are the 6 colors we have. And then I can also come back in. Remember that we had our feature here. We can come back in here and we can edit it, going back to different ways of editing color. And right now, all of these are linked to one another. So we can create some really interesting, color schemes or options for ourselves. Some of them look really wonderful and some of them just look horrible. But that's something that we can do, with any photograph that you take. And this is a photograph that I took. I'm going to reset all of this. With my smartphone. Okay. So those are some of the things that we can do. And I like bringing up some of the effects that weren't talked about in the lessons, but some of the graphic styles that are available to you in the libraries like Neon. Some of the others like the Scribble and the Pucker and Bloat, that sort of thing. Those can be really effective ways of enhancing your illustration without a lot of muss or fuss. And again, using the appearance panel is a way to access that and to make your shapes and your illustrations more complex and a little bit more interesting and intricate. That's a smart way to go. So I can select any of these, select this one, and I'm going to reset. Because I don't know where I closed them, but I'm going to go ahead and reset Essentials Classic just to make sure that I know where some of these are. So here's my appearance panel. Hold down, and you can see all of the appearances that you can change. Okay, so back to our lesson itself, 13. Oh, and the last thing. This is, I won't say it's minor, but it's important that if you do scale something and you discover it's not looking right, remember that you need to select that once it is, let's make sure that the whole object is selected. You may or may not want to make sure that you select, that you want to make sure that you scale the stroke. So let me go back, let me double click on the scale tool. There we go. Right, scale strokes and effects. So this is the place that I'm accustomed looking at. If you want to transform objects, remember that you can also scale patterns and leave the shape alone. That's really very useful. So right now we have, scale, stroke, and effects. So I changed it to 200%. And if I change it, from 200 down to 25%, the strokes and effects have been scaled so that it works out just fine. Because if you don't do that, you will really stomp on your illustration that you created. So that is another important point. Yeah, one more thing, and then I'll call it a day. It's something that you need to think about, that, for example, if I select my little dot here, and I'm going to bring up layers because I want to apply an effect. Okay, now I have a lot of things on this layer, but if I apply it to all the layer, since I have all of these elements on this layer, if I select or target the layer itself and I want to apply a drop shadow to it, notice what happens. It's going to apply a drop shadow to everything. So maybe what I should do instead to demonstrate my point is create a new layer. I'm going to take this ellipse and I'm going to drag it onto that layer. There we go. And I'm going to lock the other layer so I don't accidentally change things. I'm going to target my new layer. And under effects, under stylize, I'm going to add drop shadow. And I had changed that from the other day. So let's go back to black. And I'm just going to leave those settings. They'll be fine. Let's change the opacity a little bit. Okay, so there's my drop shadow. Now, if you're not careful when you apply effects and target an entire layer, that when you have that layer selected, and it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to go ahead and create another shape here. Let's go ahead and create a little star shape. Notice that it too automatically has a drop shadow, the same one that we created for the circle. So that can be advantageous to make sure that you have consistency. If it's not what you want, then you need to make sure that your objects are on correct layer and not apply it to an entire layer, but to an object only. But that's what happens when you apply effects to an entire layer and you target the whole layer, that anything that you, from there on out, that you put on that layer will have that effect applied to it. Okay. So that's all I wanted to cover today. Kind of expand on what the lesson talked about and show you some of my favorites as well. So remember, we only have a couple days left. Excuse me, I'll be talking about symbols for the next couple of days. If there's anything that you would like me to review or go over that maybe you're having, you're struggling with, then please let me know and I will cover that. Okay. In the meantime, good luck with your final assignment. Good luck finishing the lessons. Remember, at the end of the week, lessons 1 through 14 are due. I will tally them this weekend, and then if you have all 14, you get 10 points. For each lesson that's missing, there will be a point deducted. Okay, and I will do my best before next semester, the fall semester begins, which is this next Monday, to have everything graded so that you'll have your final grade tallied. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to say goodbye for today. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and pause my recording, say goodbye, and again, say good luck to all of you. And again, please contact me if you have any questions.